The communication array on Luna Base crackled to life at 0347 hours, cutting through the routine chatter of night shift operations. Communications Officer Sarah Chen nearly dropped her coffee when the massive holographic display flickered with an incoming signal from deep space. The transmission bore the unmistakable crimson seal of the Galactic regime, a sight that made every human in the solar system break into cold sweats. Director Martinez to the comm center, Priority Alpha. Chen's voice echoed through the corridors of humanity's most advanced listening post. Her hands trembled as she worked to stabilize the signal, knowing that messages from the regime never brought good news. Director Carlos Martinez arrived within minutes, his hair disheveled and uniform hastily thrown on. Behind him came Dr. Elena Vasquez, the base's xenolinguistics expert, and Commander Jake Sullivan from Earth Defense Command. The small group gathered around the holographic projector as Chen initiated the playback. The image that materialized was both magnificent and terrifying. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, the regime's ambassador Primary Zexthul appeared in full ceremonial armor. His 6 arms moved in precise, ritual gestures, while his 4 eyes, each the size of a human fist, fixed their gaze directly at the camera. The chitinous plates covering his body gleamed under harsh artificial light, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. Species designation, human. Planet designation, Sol 3, locally known as Earth. This message constitutes your final administrative notice under Galactic Regime Protocol 7 Alpha 9. Your species has been observed for the past 57 standard cycles and has been found consistently defiant of galactic order. Dr. Vasquez translated the time reference quickly. 57 standard cycles equals about 73 Earth years, she whispered, her face pale. They've been watching us since before the Korean War. Ambassador Zexthul continued, his multiple arms weaving hypnotic patterns. Your species exhibits the following problematic behaviors: excessive territorial aggression, refusal to acknowledge superior authority, development of weapons beyond your technological tier, and most significantly, the complete absence of proper submission instincts. These traits have been deemed incompatible with galactic harmony. Commander Sullivan clenched his fists. During his 20-year military career, he had fought in 3 major conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. They're talking about us like we're livestock, he muttered. The alien ambassador's image shifted, and behind him appeared a star chart showing the Milky Way galaxy. Thousands of systems glowed in the same crimson as the regime's seal, while Earth's yellow sun blinked alone in a sea of red. Observe the current state of galactic civilization. Over 47,000 species have joined the regime through peaceful integration. Each recognized the wisdom of unity under our guidance. Each understood that individual planetary concerns must yield to the greater good of galactic stability. Peaceful integration, Director Martinez scoffed. I wonder how many of those species had a choice. The display zoomed in on several systems near Earth's region of space. Your immediate neighbors, the Centauri Republic, the Vegan Collective, and the Wolfpack Alliance, all requested regime protection when your species began demonstrating aggressive expansion patterns. They fear your unpredictable nature and your tendency toward violence when faced with obstacles. Dr. Vasquez paused her translation work. This is incredible. They're saying our own neighbors asked for protection from us, but we've never even made contact with any of these civilizations. Exactly, Ambassador Zexthul continued, as if reading her thoughts. Your species assumes it is alone, yet you develop weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. You fight constant wars among your own kind, while simultaneously reaching toward the stars with the same aggressive intent. This pattern has been observed 47 times in galactic history. Each time, it has led to catastrophic disruption if left unchecked. The ambassador's 4 eyes seemed to focus more intently. Therefore, under the authority of the Galactic Regime Council, backed by the combined fleets of all member species, Earth is hereby given its final notice. You have exactly 100 standard solar rotations to demonstrate complete submission to regime authority. Commander Sullivan did rapid calculations. 100 days. They're giving us just over 3 months. The terms of submission are as follows, the alien continued, his voice taking on an even more formal tone. First, all military forces must be disbanded immediately. Second, all weapons capable of planet-wide destruction must be deactivated and surrendered to regime custody. Third, a regime governance council will be established in each of your major population centers. Fourth, all space-based infrastructure must be transferred to regime control. Fifth, population centers will be reorganized according to optimal efficiency standards as determined by our sociologists. The hologram flickered as the transmission began to degrade. Failure to comply with these terms will result in the implementation of Standard Cleansing Protocol 12. This protocol has been successfully applied to 17 species in the past millennium who refused peaceful integration. The process typically takes between 6 and 14 standard rotations to complete, depending on planetary resistance levels. Director Martinez felt ice forming in his stomach. They're talking about genocide like it's a routine administrative procedure. Your species possesses certain unusual characteristics that make you particularly dangerous to galactic stability. Ambassador Zexthul continued. Your psychological profiles indicate an almost pathological refusal to accept defeat. Your history shows a pattern of turning apparent disasters into victories through sheer stubborn determination. Your warriors continue fighting even when facing certain death, and your civilians show remarkable resilience under extreme pressure. The ambassador's chitinous plates shifted color slightly, indicating what their xenobiologists would later identify as confusion or uncertainty. These traits, while admirable in small doses, become destructive when possessed by an entire species. You do not know when to surrender. You do not understand the concept of acceptable losses. You fight not just for victory, but for the principle of fighting itself. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her notes. That almost sounds like respect, or maybe fear. We have observed your species' response to existential threats, the alien continued. When faced with global pandemic, you developed countermeasures in record time. When threatened with nuclear annihilation, you established deterrent systems that actually worked. When confronted with environmental collapse, you began developing technologies to reverse the damage. This pattern suggests that external pressure only makes your species more dangerous, not less. The transmission quality continued to deteriorate. But the ambassador's final words came through clearly. Therefore, the regime offers you this final opportunity for peaceful integration. Accept our terms, and your species will be preserved as a useful component of galactic civilization. Your natural aggression will be channeled toward approved targets, and your unusual problem-solving abilities will be employed for the benefit of all regime members. The hologram began to fade, but Ambassador Zexthul's 4 eyes remained visible until the very end. The alternative is complete elimination. We have prepared contingencies for your expected non-compliance. Our battle fleets are already moving into position around your system. Our planetary bombardment platforms are calibrated for your world-specific composition. We have studied your military capabilities extensively and have determined that your current technology poses no meaningful threat to our forces. As the transmission ended, the 4 humans stood in stunned silence. The weight of what they had just heard settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Humanity had just received an ultimatum from a galactic superpower that considered Earth's destruction a routine matter of cosmic administration. Commander Sullivan was the first to speak. We need to contact Earth Command immediately. This changes everything. Director Martinez nodded grimly. Sarah, start copying this transmission to every major government, military installation, and research facility on Earth. Use every communication channel we have. Dr. Vasquez was already working at her console, pulling up linguistic analysis programs. I'm detecting subtle patterns in the ambassador's speech that suggest this isn't just a standard ultimatum. There are emotional undertones I've never seen in official regime communications before. What kind of undertones? Martinez asked. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. They're trying to sound confident and threatening, but something about humanity has them genuinely worried. That comment about us not knowing when to surrender. I think they've run probability models on human behavior and gotten results that concern them. Commander Sullivan studied the star chart still displayed on the auxiliary screens. Look at this deployment pattern. They're not just sending a conquest fleet. This is a full-scale extermination armada. You don't bring that kind of firepower unless you're expecting serious resistance. As emergency klaxons began sounding throughout Luna Base, the four humans realized they were witnessing a pivotal moment in human history. The species that had conquered 47,000 worlds was afraid of one small blue planet and its stubborn, aggressive inhabitants. The next 100 days would determine whether that fear was justified. In the depths of space, massive regime battleships began altering course toward the Sol system, their commanders reviewing tactical assessments that painted a disturbing picture. Every computer simulation of human behavior yielded the same conclusion. This species would fight to the absolute end, regardless of odds or consequences. What the regime didn't understand was that for humans, the end was just the beginning. 72 hours after the regime's ultimatum reached Earth, the planet transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Emergency sessions convened in every major capital as world leaders grappled with the impossible reality of alien contact and imminent invasion. But instead of panic and surrender, something uniquely human began to emerge. President Jennifer Walsh stood before a joint session of the United Nations, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we face a choice that no human generation has ever confronted. An alien empire that has conquered thousands of worlds demands our complete surrender. They give us 100 days to submit or face extinction. The assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from nations that had been enemies just days before now sat side by side, united by a threat that made their earthly conflicts seem petty. Russian Premier Volkov leaned toward Chinese President Li, whispering translations for delegates whose universal translators struggled with the technical terminology of interstellar warfare. The regime assumes we will behave like every other species they've encountered, President Walsh continued. They expect us to calculate odds, weigh survival against resistance, and choose the logical path of submission. They have studied our military capabilities and concluded that resistance is futile. A thin smile crossed her lips. They clearly haven't studied us very well. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, NORAD had been transformed into humanity's war planning center. General Patricia Harrison, newly appointed Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces, stood before a holographic display showing regime fleet movements. The alien armada was massive beyond comprehension. Over 3,000 capital ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest aircraft carriers. Their main battle group is still 47 days out, reported Colonel David Kim, the facility's chief intelligence officer. But we're tracking advanced scouts throughout the outer system. They're mapping our defensive positions and studying our response patterns. Dr. Michael Chen, recently transferred from MIT's Theoretical Physics Department, highlighted sections of the enemy formation. The good news is their approach is methodical and predictable. They're following standard regime doctrine for planetary subjugation. The bad news is that doctrine has apparently worked on 47,000 other worlds. General Harrison studied the display with the calm intensity that had made her legendary in 3 previous conflicts. Colonel Kim, what have we learned about regime military psychology from the Luna transmission? Fascinating patterns, General. They fight like a bureaucracy. Very efficient, very thorough, but also very rigid. Every battle follows predetermined protocols. They appear to have standard solutions for standard resistance types. And non-standard resistance? That's where it gets interesting. Our xenopsychology team analyzed the ambassador's speech patterns. When he mentioned our pathological refusal to accept defeat, his vocal stress indicators spiked significantly. This isn't just another conquest for them. They're genuinely concerned about how we might react. Dr. Chen activated another display showing Earth's hasty defensive preparations. We've been building orbital defense platforms for 6 decades, ostensibly to protect against asteroid impacts. Turns out that technology scales up nicely for alien invasion. The new railgun satellites came online this morning. Will they be enough? Harrison asked. Against conventional invasion tactics? Absolutely not. Their shields and armor are generations ahead of our weapons. But if we can make them deviate from their standard playbook, the general nodded grimly. Show them something they've never seen before? Meanwhile, in research facilities across the globe, humanity's greatest minds worked frantically to level the technological playing field. At CERN, physicists pushed the Large Hadron Collider beyond safe parameters, searching for exotic matter that might power new weapon systems. In Silicon Valley, computer scientists developed quantum viruses designed to infiltrate alien computing networks. At Baikonur, engineers retrofitted every available rocket with makeshift kinetic bombardment payloads. But the most crucial development was happening in the minds of ordinary people. News of the invasion had spread worldwide within hours, and instead of panic, something remarkable occurred. Humans began volunteering for military service in unprecedented numbers. Factories retooled for military production without government orders. Citizens organized neighborhood watch groups armed with everything from hunting rifles to improvised explosives. Maria Santos, a school teacher from São Paulo, found herself leading a group of 60 volunteers building defensive positions around the city's critical infrastructure. My grandfather fought in World War II, she told a news reporter. He always said freedom isn't free. I guess it's our turn to pay the price. Similar stories emerged from every continent. In Tokyo, elderly men who had never held weapons trained alongside teenage gamers whose reflexes had been honed by decades of virtual warfare. In Stockholm, software engineers worked 18-hour shifts developing new communication protocols that couldn't be intercepted by alien technology. In Lagos, mechanical engineers designed cheap, mass-producible drone swarms that could overwhelm sophisticated defense systems through sheer numbers. The regime's advanced scouts watched these preparations with growing bewilderment. Their psychological profiles predicted that humans would either surrender immediately or fight conventional resistance battles that could be easily suppressed. Instead, they observed an entire species preparing for what appeared to be a war of total extinction. Ambassador Zex Thul received hourly reports from the scout ships, each one more disturbing than the last. Admiral Crichton, explain these readings to me, he demanded during a holographic conference with the fleet commander. Admiral Crichton's 4 arms gestured uncertainly. Ambassador, the humans are not behaving according to any known resistance pattern. They appear to be preparing for complete societal mobilization, something we've only seen in species facing immediate extinction. But we offered them survival through submission. Why do they act as if destruction is inevitable? Perhaps they do not understand the offer. Impossible. Our translation protocols are perfect. They understand our terms precisely. Ambassador Zex Thul's chitinous plates shifted to a color indicating deep concern. Send me the detailed behavioral analysis. The report that followed painted a picture that challenged everything the regime understood about intelligent life. Humans were not just preparing to fight, they were preparing to fight in ways that violated basic assumptions about rational behavior. Parents taught children to build explosives. Scientists shared classified research openly, accelerating technological development at the cost of security. Military leaders planned operations with casualty rates that would be considered genocidal by any rational species. They are willing to accept planetary devastation rather than surrender, Admiral Crichton concluded. Our models indicate that even if we achieve total victory, the cost of occupation would be prohibitive. These humans will continue fighting until every last individual is eliminated. Ambassador Zexthol studied combat footage from the scout ships. In one clip, human civilians attacked a reconnaissance drone with improvised weapons, showing no fear despite being vastly outgunned. In another, children no older than juveniles were observed constructing defensive positions around their schools. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach, the Admiral suggested carefully. The regime has protocols for dealing with species that cannot be pacified through conventional conquest. Total elimination protocols require approval from the High Council, Zexthol replied, and the High Council will ask why a single primitive planet requires such extreme measures. What neither alien leader understood was that they were witnessing the activation of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage, the ability to transform existential threats into unifying challenges. The same psychological traits that had allowed humans to survive ice ages, plagues, and world wars were now operating on a global scale. In orbit above Earth, the first completed defensive platforms went online. The railgun systems were crude by regime standards, but they were built with a uniquely human philosophy. If you can't outfight your enemy, make sure the victory costs more than they're willing to pay. Commander Rebecca Torres, stationed aboard Orbital Platform Alpha, ran final systems checks while monitoring alien scout movements. Central Command, this is Alpha. All systems green and ready for engagement. Copy that, Alpha. Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to show them something they've never seen before. Torres smiled grimly as she watched the distant lights of approaching scout ships. Roger that, Command. Let's give these aliens a proper human welcome. The next phase of Earth's defense would soon begin, and with it, the galaxy's first encounter with a species that considered surrender a form of death and death merely another battlefield. The first shots of the war were fired not by massive battle fleets, but by a single human teenager with a modified gaming computer. 18-year-old Alex Chen, working from his bedroom in Vancouver, successfully hacked into a regime scout ship's navigation system and sent it careening into an asteroid. The alien vessel's destruction sent shockwaves through the entire invasion fleet. How is this possible? Admiral Crichton demanded as damage reports flooded in. Their technology is primitive. Our systems should be completely immune to their cyber attacks. The fleet's chief technician, Engineer Prime Zalvex, manipulated multiple data streams with obvious distress. Admiral, the human did not attack our primary systems. Instead, he introduced chaos variables into our automated course corrections. The ship's computer tried to compensate for problems that did not exist, eventually creating actual problems that caused system failure. Explain in tactical terms. They made us defeat ourselves, sir. This single incident revealed a fundamental flaw in the regime's understanding of human warfare. For 70,000 years, they had conquered species that fought logically, seeking to minimize losses while achieving clear objectives. Humans fought with a completely different philosophy. If you cannot win, ensure your enemy loses too. Ambassador Zexthul called an emergency conference with the High Council on Regime Prime. The holographic chamber materialized around him, filled with the galaxy's most powerful beings. At the center sat High Counselor Mordex, a being so ancient that his species had been among the first to join the regime voluntarily. "Ambassador, your reports are disturbing," the High Counselor began, his mental projections carrying undertones of concern that transcended species barriers. "You describe a species that appears to welcome its own destruction rather than accept reasonable terms of surrender. Honored Counselor, our psychological assessments were fundamentally flawed. We assumed humans would behave like rational actors, weighing survival against resistance and choosing the logical path. Instead, they appear to have redefined survival itself. Clarify. For humans, survival is not about preserving individual lives or even their species' existence. It is about preserving their ability to make choices. They would rather die free than live as subjects. This mindset makes them immune to conventional conquest strategies." High Counselor Mordex pondered this information while consulting data from 47,000 previous conquests. "Have we encountered similar psychology before?" "Never at this scale, Counselor. We have documented 17 species with limited populations that chose extinction over submission. But Earth contains over 8 billion individuals, all apparently sharing this same pathological commitment to autonomy." The High Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galactic regime had built its power on a simple principle. Overwhelming force combined with the offer of survival made resistance logically impossible. Earth represented the first time they had encountered an entire species that rejected this logic. Back in the Sol system, human preparations intensified as the main regime fleet drew closer. The past 90 days had transformed Earth's orbital space into a maze of defensive installations, mining platforms converted to weapons, and civilian craft retrofitted for kamikaze attacks. But the most significant changes were happening on the planet's surface. General Harrison stood in the newly constructed Global Command Center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. Surrounding her, holographic displays showed defensive positions on every continent. What she saw would have been impossible just months earlier, a completely unified human military force representing every nation on Earth. "Status report," she commanded. Colonel Kim highlighted sections of the global defense network. "All major population centers are fortified and ready for siege conditions. Civilian evacuation to hardened shelters is 93% complete. Underground manufacturing facilities are producing ammunition and equipment at maximum capacity." "What about our special projects?" Dr. Chen stepped forward, exhaustion evident in his voice after months of non-stop work. "Project Prometheus is ready for deployment. We've managed to weaponize our entire nuclear arsenal in ways the regime won't expect." "Explain." Traditional thinking uses nuclear weapons as area denial tools. You destroy enemy formations and contaminate territory. But we realized that aliens trying to occupy Earth need the planet to be habitable. So instead of building bigger bombs, we built dirtier ones. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of Earth with thousands of highlighted points. These are cobalt bombs, designed to maximize long-term radiation rather than immediate destruction. If triggered simultaneously, they will render Earth uninhabitable for any carbon-based life form for approximately 500 years. General Harrison studied the map with grim satisfaction. A planet they can't conquer is worthless to them. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued. "Project Icarus involves every satellite, space station, and orbital platform we've built. When the final battle begins, we'll deorbit everything simultaneously. The debris field will make Earth's orbital space impassable for decades, maybe centuries." Colonel Kim added his own update. "Project Samson is perhaps our most ambitious. We've identified the exact gravitational points where regime ships must position themselves for planetary bombardment. Our deep space mining charges are already in position. When their fleet arrives, we'll collapse those gravitational wells and drag their ships into destructive resonance patterns. Casualties? Harrison asked. Total. For both sides. The general nodded grimly. Good. Let them know that victory over humanity costs everything. As the deadline approached, something unprecedented occurred in galactic history. The regime began receiving communications from other species, not offers of support, but requests for information about human defensive capabilities. Several recently conquered worlds had begun experiencing their own resistance movements, inspired by reports of Earth's preparations. On Vega Prime, former Counselor Keltar listened to smuggled recordings of human defensive planning. His people had surrendered after minimal resistance, accepting regime rule in exchange for survival. Now, hearing human leaders calmly discuss planetary suicide rather than submission, he felt something his species had forgotten: shame. They fight like gods, he whispered to his fellow resistance members. Not for victory, but for the right to exist as themselves. The psychological impact spread throughout the galaxy. The regime's authority had always rested on the assumption that rational beings would choose survival over principles. Earth's example challenged that fundamental assumption, and subjected species began asking dangerous questions about the true cost of their survival. 48 hours before the main fleet's arrival, Ambassador Zexthul made one final attempt at negotiation. His transmission reached Earth during a global broadcast being watched by nearly every human on the planet. People of Earth, he began, his four eyes showing what human experts now recognized as genuine concern. We have observed your preparations. We understand that you prefer death to submission. This is unprecedented in our experience. His chitinous plates shifted through colors that indicated deep uncertainty. The High Council has authorized me to offer revised terms. You may maintain your current government structures and military forces. You need only acknowledge regime supremacy in interstellar matters and accept our guidance on technological development. President Walsh, speaking for all of humanity, delivered the response that would echo through galactic history. Ambassador Zexthul, we appreciate your revised offer. Our answer remains the same as it has always been: no. You choose extinction over compromise? We choose to remain human. If that means extinction, so be it. The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, subjected species watched in amazement as an entire planet rejected survival in favor of dignity. The main regime fleet entered the Sol system exactly 100 days after the original ultimatum. 3,000 capital ships, supported by countless smaller vessels, began their final approach to Earth. Their sensors immediately detected the massive defensive preparations, the orbital mines, and the suicide positions of human forces. Admiral Crichton studied the tactical displays with growing dread. They have prepared for total mutual destruction. Our victory will require the complete elimination of their biosphere. Proceed with standard conquest protocols, Ambassador Zexthul ordered, though his voice lacked conviction. Admiral, Engineer Prime Zalvex interrupted, we are receiving thousands of transmissions from human civilian populations. Surrender offers? No, sir. They appear to be taunting us. The transmissions played across the fleet's communication systems. Children singing defiant songs. Elderly humans sharing stories of previous wars they had survived. Artists creating final masterpieces dedicated to the idea of freedom. Scientists broadcasting their research freely to anyone in the galaxy who might continue their work. Most disturbing of all were the military communications. Human commanders calmly coordinating their final battle plans with the matter-of-fact professionalism of beings who had already accepted death and moved beyond fear. As the two forces closed for what would become known as the Battle of Sol, neither side fully understood that they were about to fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization. The regime had built their empire on the assumption that survival was every species' highest priority. Humanity was about to prove that assumption catastrophically wrong. The battle that followed would last only 18 hours, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy for millennia to come. When it ended, both sides would be destroyed, but the example of human resistance would spread to every subjugated world in the galaxy. The age of the galactic regime was about to end, brought down not by superior weapons or brilliant strategy, but by a species that refused to accept that survival was worth any price. Freedom, they had proven, was worth everything.